Hello, welcome to Plant-Based Large Family. I did a walkthrough in the garden in the winter, and I also did a walkthrough in the garden in the fall. So a couple weeks ago I thought I'd do a spring walkthrough. I obviously didn't get that video up, and then I realized how much the garden changes in just 2 weeks during the springtime. I decided to plant some spring bulbs a couple of years ago. I covered 2 strips along our brick walkway with newspaper, put down the spring bulbs, and covered them with about 4 inches of mulch. Late in the summer, I weed the Bermuda grass that creeps into the beds and cover them again with 4 inches of mulch to start the cycle over. It's very low maintenance. This is our 4th summer gardening the Back to Eden way, so I'll try to give some tricks, tips, and observations as I show you our garden. Here are some cabbages, kale, broccoli, and sprouting broccoli I planted last fall to transplant. I never got a chance to transplant them in the late summer, but they made it through the winter, so I'm going to transplant them this month. Mulching is great. Make sure you keep up with the weeding and the mulching though, or this will happen. 2 weeks later, I've transplanted most of them. I'll transplant these later this week. The kids and I have been weeding daily. More on that later. This mound of wood chips is a patch of fingerling potatoes. Note all the fencing at the end, because it will be gone in the next video. We collect wood ash from a friend who heats her house with wood. This is one way we add minerals back into the garden. That mound of wood chips has now doubled. I planted 50 pounds of potatoes this year in total. The patches are spread out throughout the garden. I would have planted more, but I ran out of space. Behind this potato patch, I transplanted some of the brassicas from the milk jugs. They're small now, but as long as I cover them to protect them from the cabbage moth, they really do well. And I'll show you the milk jugs later. In this section, I planted beet seeds. In the next section, I planted spring garden peas. And under the cover, I have some brassicas which have survived the cold and the deer this winter. If you look very closely, you'll see we have our first purple sprouting broccoli of the year. And 2 weeks later, we still have the overwintered brassicas, the spring peas, and under this cover I transplanted the broccoli and the cabbage I showed you earlier with the beet seeds. The trick is keeping it covered with this crazy spring wind. And the peas are just starting to pop through. I don't start seeds indoors. I start them in milk jugs outside. By winter sowing like this, there is very little maintenance, no mess indoors, and no money spent. I've winter sown all of my brassicas, lettuce, flowers, various melons, cucumbers, tomatoes, and various squashes. Because of our warm spring weather, they're growing quickly in their milk jugs. So last week I planted most of them out. Of course, this week we're having 3 nights drop below freezing. I'm covering them in milk jugs held by sticks so the wind doesn't whip them away, and I'm going to cover them with blankets. I'll let you know if that keeps them alive. I sure hope it does. In this box, I have overwintered carrots and spinach. Here's an example of an overwintered carrot. In the Back to Eden garden, you just pull it, it'll come up nicely. You dust off the dirt, and then you can eat it straight from there. But as far as planting, then all you have to do is smooth the wood chips over, and it's ready to be planted. A bit more spinach that weathered the cold is in the next box, and one lonely carrot that made it through the winter is here as well. Two weeks later, everything is still looking great. I'm going to let the overwintered carrot stay in a bit longer to fatten up. Here's one of our apple trees. I've been working each year to prune it like Paul Gauchi does. The ground underneath is very soft, and everything planted under it has done well so far. I plant cool weather crops like cilantro, beets, and lettuce under it on the north side during the summer, and they do really well. I followed Paul's advice to use all the ground space I can. So early this spring, I planted some asparagus crowns to the north of the tree. and they're just starting to pop through. I also planted some June-bearing strawberries to the east of the tree, and they're greening up nicely, and to the south of the tree. I'm sure these will all spread just like our other strawberries, but I don't know, I may just have a garden full of berries in the coming years. Here's the apple tree 2 weeks later. I'm not sure why the leaves look yellow in this video. They don't look like this in real life. Anyway, the exciting news is that it's setting a lot of fruit. We've only ever gotten one apple off this tree, and a bird got that. It's 9 years old. I don't know why it's all of a sudden setting fruit, but I sure am thankful for it. Beside the apple tree, I have 2 more potato patches, and I also planted some lettuce from the greenhouses that will also need to be covered this week. Here's one of our peach trees. Here it's just finished blossoming. Two weeks later, the leaves are all out, and it has also set quite a bit of fruit. Everyone in our area either has given up on growing peaches or sprays them heavily. We try to go the more than organic route, so this year we put a large pen around the tree during the spring so the chickens can take care of the bugs that like to inhabit the peaches. We'll do it in the fall as well. Here's our other peach tree. Notice 2 things. Number 1, the difference in blossoms, and number 2, the fact that one is mulched and the other is not. They're about 10 yards away from each other, and yet the one that's mulched blossoms before the one that is not, and it keeps its leaves longer than the one that's not. One day, we hope to have all the trees mulched. They love it. Here's our other apple tree. It was hit by tent caterpillars many years ago, and it's yet to fully recover. It's just beginning to bud, and 2 weeks later, full of leaves. Next, we have our 2 pear trees. Again, I'm pruning them down each year just the way Paul advises. They're full of flowers. And 2 weeks later, they're bursting with baby pears. We've not gotten more than a handful of pears in 9 years, and the deer got those. I'm so excited. As long as the frost doesn't kill them and we can figure out a way to keep the deer away, we'll have plenty of pears this year. This newly mulched area is our raspberry bed. The raspberry canes are just starting to pop through. We need to trellis them sometime soon. These raspberries are everbearing. I just planted some June-bearing raspberries, so I'm hoping in a year or so I'll have raspberries from June all the way until November. 2 weeks ago, our blueberry bushes started to bloom. Here's one of our resident bumblebees pollinating the blueberries. They're setting a lot of fruit. Again, hopefully, the frosts don't kill them. Our ever-bearing strawberry plants started to pop through their blanket of mulch 2 weeks ago. If you've never heard Paul talk about how to care for strawberry plants, he says to cover them in the fall with wood chips. Not deeply, it doesn't take much to cover them. Then in the spring, the older, weaker plants won't be able to break through the wood chips. They'll just decompose. The younger, healthier plants will be strong enough to break through. This way, you'll never have to thin your plants. This is our 3rd year of doing this. Hey look, our first flower. Two weeks later, they're really filling out the strawberry beds. More flowers are blooming, and we have actual strawberries forming. We started out with 25 crowns 2 years ago, and it's expanded to this already. You can't really tell, but I promise that's it's like a cone of a strawberry already forming. We've had some wild blackberry shoots pop up through the garden randomly. I think we're going to rip them up so they don't interfere with our raspberry patch close by. By the way, the blackberry shoots are right in front of 2 more potato patches. We moved our chicken tractor to where the sweet potatoes were planted last year. We're going to let the melons grow up and over it. Here's some watermelon transplants from the milk jugs. We'll have to cover these as well and just hope for the best. This is actually the first potato patch I planted. The potatoes have already started to come through the mulch. They'll likely die back with the cold weather this week, but they'll bounce back soon enough. The great news about planting potatoes the Back to Eden way is that after you plant them and cover them with 8 inches of mulch, you're done. No hilling, no maintenance, just wait until they die back and harvest. So that's the end of the garden area. Heading on over to the chicken coop, here's the cherry tree we planted last winter. Look, blossoms! I was so excited when I saw these. Speaking of the chickens, they're doing well. We have a number of young cockerels we hatched last year that are still learning their place, but overall they're doing well. You can see the alpha male right there. He's a great rooster. We have one hen that's already gone broody. We're looking forward to baby chicks this week. This is the area where we throw all of our kitchen scraps and weeds. They love taking dust baths here. Here's the cherry tree 2 weeks later. I can't seem to find where the blossoms are, so I can't tell whether it set fruit or not. Oh well, we'll find out later. We planted an even younger, smaller cherry tree just on the other side of the chicken run. It blossomed even more than the older, larger tree. Only time will tell. It seems the bees did a great job this spring. On the other side of the coop, we have a section that has some fresh grass for the chickens. We're looking to expand this run and move some things around in the coming weeks. Let's talk about weeds really quickly. In our zone, we have hot, humid summers. Our wood chips break down every year. If we don't replenish them each year, the weeds will take over. We got a bit behind this winter, what with me having a baby and all, so now we're weeding sections at a time and covering them in mulch. Once we get all this done, we'll not need to weed again until about August. One of the many perks of the Back to Eden garden. Who else can say they only need to weed once in 4 months, especially the summer months? You can see the newly mulched areas versus the other areas we still need to work on. The blueberry patch is the worst. I don't plant here because it still has tarp under the mulch, so I don't feel the urgency to weed here as much. Then there's the new section we started this winter. We really need to work on this area. The weeds look like they're starting to take over. That is not good. I hope you enjoyed our spring Back to Eden garden tour. I'll try to do more updates throughout the summer if that's what you would like. Let me know in the comments if there's something specific you want to see in regards to our Back to Eden garden or